British government left Singapore in 1960, and we became part of Malaysia. At that time, Singapore was economically very, very poor. It was considered to be poorer than Manila, than Yangon, than Saigon City. Now it's called Ho Chi Minh City, poorer than that. And in terms of housing, out of 1.6 million people in 1960, 1.3 million lived in squatters and slums. That means 3 out of 4 people live in squatters and slum area. That's the Singapore I grew up in. So precisely because of that poor background, our first generation political leaders under Mr. Lee Kuan Yew decided that we have to catch up quickly if we want to stand tall among the cities in the world. So on the one hand, they quickly created Central Business District, and not created, allocate the land for Central Business District, and allocated a piece of land for industry, and of course continue to build up our port facilities, and at the same time started the public housing policy. Actually, there was public housing in Singapore under the British rule. It was under what we call the Singapore Improvement Trust. But under Singapore Improvement Trust, in 27 years, they only built 32,000 units of public housing because they said that the contractors could not cope with more. But Singapore government decided that we have to find every possible way to develop public housing. And therefore, we invited anybody who wanted to be a contractor to build public housing to just come and join us, and we would give them a job. And our engineers and architects would show them how to build. And that's how we built up the contracting capacity. So in 1982, the Housing and Development Board built 62,000 units in 1 year. But the Singapore Improvement Trust built 32,000 in 27 years. You can see that when you have determination and the government gives the support, the professional would find the skills to do it, you can create miracle. The original concept of public housing was to give everybody a roof over his head, okay? But when I came back to Singapore in 1969, of course, we have to deliver what the government told us, to create a roof over his head. But myself and many of our colleagues felt that since we are building for the majority of the people in Singapore, we should set our vision higher. We're not just creating a roof over our head. We should be creating communities with all the basic essential facilities for the people. And at the same time, we also want to create a community where people feel that they belong to each other and not just faces that you happen to see. Because there's an English saying that a city is but a gallery of portraits. Now, I didn't want that. I remember that statement. I wanted our housing estates to have people who not only live together, they create a sense of community spirit, and among people of different income groups and among people from different races. So in order to do that, we use the European new town concept. So that, but our new town, in order to put all the facilities we feel that a person needs on a daily basis, I also went through a lot of study about, took me 2 years to decide a new town need to be about 200,000 people in order to have all the basic facilities that the people need on the daily basis. So the Singapore New Town was more or less about 200,000 people. But 200,000 people for New Town is too big to create a community spirit. So we divided them into neighborhoods. Now, neighborhoods also has a neighborhood center. New Town has a town center to provide all the facilities. Now, at neighborhoods, we try to create a neighborhood of walking radius of about 500 meters so that people can walk to the neighborhood without using cars or bicycles and so on. And with the 500 radius neighborhood, we can provide the essential facilities in the neighborhood centers, plus schools, primary schools and secondary school. But that is still too big a piece of land for people to feel that they belong to each other, they are close neighbors. So then, after further study, I decided to introduce the concept of precinct under neighborhood. Precinct is like 2 to 3 hectares with about 1,000 families inside the precinct. I know that this precinct idea works. And this precinct idea not only works for community spirit, but because there are about 1,000 families inside. So in that 1,000 family, we have people from the poorest to the higher middle income groups who will qualify for public housing. So we're mixing people of different income groups together. And also we're mixing different ethnic groups, Chinese, Malaysian, Indian together. So when you now go to Singapore around, you don't see specialized poor area. You can't find them anymore. You don't see specialized ethnic group. In the past, we have Chinese village, Malay village, Indian. Now you don't see them. They are all Singaporeans. So actually, a good physical design affects human behavior. I believe that even when I was a young man. So I put in all this effort to create an environment. So our public housing is not just a roof over your head. It's actually creating a kind of livable environment with good community spirit, with a sense of belonging to the land. A lot of these ideas that I just mentioned, of course, did not come from me alone. For example, to mix the different racial groups together was an instruction from the government. And, to mix a different income group together, I would say happened almost by accident, because the beauty of Singapore public housing policy is there's only one policy. You see, in many other countries, you have a policy of public housing for the poorest, another policy for not so poor. And so when you build a housing estate for the poorest, they will stay, it becomes a ghetto. But we only have one policy, so it gives us a chance to mix them all together. So the fact that we have one public housing policy, to me, is one of the very important factors that we have successful public housing. And on top of that, because not now, but when I was in the HDB, the role of HDB was not only to plan and to design the buildings, but also to manage the completed buildings. So when you manage completed buildings, you get a lot of complaints. There are two ways to deal with the complaint. One is to throw the complaint away, ignore them. But we actually took the complaint, the good ones, we asked sociologists, engineers, architects, estate managers to form small research committees to study them. So every 3 or 4 months, these people will give me the feedback to say, okay, this is the complaint, this is our proposed solution. Now, solution consists of 2 types. One is the mistakes that we make in the past, we have to correct. The other one is ideas that we did not think of, but the residents suggest that we put them in. So this will go to the next plan, the next building design. And that's how we keep improving our work. So a lot of people ask me, which new town, because I planned 23 new towns, which new town is my favorite new town? You can imagine what is my favorite new town. The latest one. Because the latest one have got rid of many of the mistakes and have added in a lot of new ideas. So it's the latest one. So so research is a very important factor. In fact, when I was in HCB, at the peak period, I had 12 sociologists with PhD degrees to help me, and I kept them very busy. I think there are a few important success factors here to make our public housing successful. One is, I mentioned, we have only one public housing policy. 2 is the political leaders would only tell us what they want us to do. They never told us how to do it. They will never interfere with professional work. They just told you what you should do. And you have to find how to do it. And so we had to find out how to do it. But the third factor, which is important, is that in those days, because we were such a poor country, so backward, so the government departments were all trying very hard to build up the country. So there was no silo idea. There's so silo mentality. We could pull in people from any departments, anytime, to sit down together to discuss a problem. So these are all very important contributors to our success stories. Because of our government's single policy for housing, our commitment to house everybody, and our ability to buy back land to build. So actually, our public housing success story is this. In 1960, I mentioned 3 out of 4 people live in squatters. Within 25 years, by 1985, we actually got rid of all the squatters, number 1. House everybody, no ghettos, no ethnic enclaves. Now, in 1985, how many cities in the world today can claim that? I can't think of anyone. Yeah. But we achieved that in 1985. And here, I'm saying this not so much to boast about Singapore. I'm saying this to say that given the right approach, good government policy, good professional support, any city can achieve that. I feel that the job of a planner is not so much to innovate new ideas. What is more important is to understand what people need. Now, understand what people need doesn't appear as if it's looking forward. It's almost looking backward. But if you don't understand what people need, how can you serve them? I must be the servant of the land and people, and not the master of the land and people. You see, because if you feel that you're so creative, you're so innovative, you impose your personal idea on the land and people, you're not doing a good job. But if you are the servant, you want to know what the people need, you want to know what the land needs, That's to help solving the global warming problem, then you can produce good environment for the people. It's important to respect technology, and especially the kind of smart technology. Definitely, it helps to make our life easier. But in my view, those techniques are mainly to help manage the cities and also to help creating new opportunities for the usage of the city. A smart city is so sexy that my big fear is that people think that that is the total answer to the urban environment. That's why I want to emphasize that while we respect and want to develop the smart city idea, we must not forget a very important word: design. You must design the city according to what the people need. You must understand what the people need and then design for that. After you have a good design, then you use smart city technology to make it work better or to manage better. But without good design, you cannot have a good environment. And this is what I feel that it's a kind of world trend that we have to be very worried about. I'm actually quite worried that the world is believing that if you are going for technology, you are going for creative, sexy images, then you have a good city. No way. I'm not saying that they are not important. They are desirable, but don't forget, together with that, you must have good design. In fact, I would like to add that I think the preoccupation to have original building forms, to have sexy-looking images, to me is also not good for the city. You look at Paris, everybody loves Paris. Why is Paris so beautiful? It's because all the buildings, the background buildings, are so boringly similar. Because it's so boringly similar, then Eiffel Towers, the Triumphal Arch and so on, they stand out. I only allowed about a dozen locations in Singapore to build iconic buildings, and the rest is all harmonious buildings. That's why when you come to Singapore, you feel so comfortable, so peaceful, because Singapore is a choral music group with a few soloists. If the town is designed in a logical way, I believe that it can contribute to cutting down the global warming and even save the world. And that's something, that's why I take a bit of trouble today to talk about how we plan the new towns. The hope is that this principle, I believe, can cut down the use of energy, because the energy consumed by traffic is very, very high. Now, if we can cut that down and reduce the danger of global warming, that is also one of my big wishes. Of course, my friend said, no, you don't have to worry. You don't have many years to live. But I worry about my grandchildren. Yeah. Yeah. No, nobody, actually, I haven't heard anyone talking about the connection between good urban planning and global warming. But I'm really trying to find someone to work with me to understand my theory, and some scientists, and prove it that this can indeed contribute to slowing down the global warming problem. I believe it helps, and I really hope more people know about it to save the world. In my speeches, I often tell people that The purpose of planning a city is for two words. One, people. Two, land. You work to serve the people so that their life is livable and the society is resilient. You work to serve the land so that the land is functional with all the infrastructure and sustainable. That means cut down global warming. Land and people.